Sadhana Panchakam is a short text composed by Shri Shankaracharya that uniquely outlines a series of steps or spiritual practices that are to be followed by those who seek moksha, liberation or enlightenment. The word sadhana is generally understood as spiritual practice, but literally sadhana is the means by which a goal is reached. That is, sadhana is the means to an end. The end or goal here is moksha, and the means, the sadhana, is explained in this text. Panchakam means a set of 5. Each of this text's 5 verses describes 8 individual steps, adding up to 40 altogether. These steps are to be undertaken in order, from first to last. They're like the steps you climb to enter a temple. Symbolically, a temple represents your physical body, and the deity on the temple's altar represents your true inner self, atma. Just like you have to climb a number of steps to enter a temple and see the deity inside, in the same way, you have to perform a number of spiritual practices to discover the unchanging, limitless consciousness that is your true nature. Because this text describes a series of steps, it's also called Sopana Panchakam. Sopana meaning a ladder or staircase. Before you enter a temple, the deity is already inside. Similarly, before you undergo any kind of spiritual practice, your true nature is already divine. The purpose of Vedantic sadhana is to discover your true nature, which is already present but hidden by a veil of ignorance, avidya. The means for removing that veil of ignorance is self-knowledge, atma vidya, which can be gained by following the 40 steps in this text. Following these steps is part of a lifelong spiritual journey, a journey that can broadly be divided into 4 stages. The first stage of spiritual life is to become a fully qualified student, prepared for the journey ahead. The second stage of spiritual life is a profound process of self-enquiry that ultimately leads you to gain self-knowledge. The third stage is to completely assimilate that knowledge by fully integrating it into your daily life. And the final stage of the spiritual journey is its culmination in moksha. Shri Shankaracharya breaks these 4 stages into 40 individual steps, starting with his first verse. Vedo nityam adhiyatam taruditam karma swanushthiyatam tene shasya vidhiyatam apachate kamye matisthyajyatam papaugah paridhuyatam bhavasukhe dosho nusandhiyatam atmecha vyavasiyatam nijagrahat turnam vinirgamyatam. Many obstacles can block the way during a spiritual journey, but our capacity to overcome those obstacles is limited and often inadequate. For this reason, a successful journey is impossible without God's grace, without Ishvara's blessings. To invoke Ishvara's blessings, some form of prayer is required. In Shankaracharya's time, Vedic rituals were a primary mode of prayer. Since those rituals are prescribed in the Vedas, his text begins Vedo nityam adhiyatam. The Vedas are to be studied. And taduditam karma swanushtiyatam. The rituals prescribed by the Vedas are to be performed properly. Since Vedic rituals aren't so common today, other forms of prayer can be used instead, like devotional singing, reciting hymns, and performing various kinds of worship. Tene shasya vidhiyatam. Through those prayers and worship, Ishvara's grace is invoked. If your ultimate goal is liberation, apachite kamyematisthyajatam. Your prayers and worship should not be for the sake of fulfilling worldly desires, but rather papaugaf paridhuyatam. They should be for the sake of reducing your accumulation of bad karma, because such karmas can create obstacles for your spiritual journey. Worldly pleasures can distract you during that journey. So, bhavasuke dosho nusandhiyatam. The limitations of worldly pleasures are to be reflected upon. Seeing their shortcomings, atma kshud-vyadhis. The true inner source of happiness, atma, is to be sought. The next step is to devote yourself wholeheartedly to the pursuit of atma vidya, self-knowledge. So, Shankaracharya says, nijagrahat turnam vinirgamyatam. This is a mandate to renounce worldly life, either through sannyasa, by becoming a monk, or through karma yoga, by renouncing worldly goals and carrying out your daily duties prayerfully as a devotional practice. With this step, the first verse is complete. Sangah satsu vidhiyatam bhagavato bhaktir dridhadhiyatam Santyadih parichiyatam dridataram karmashu santyajyatam sad-vidvan upasripyatam pratidinam tatpaduka sevyatam brahmaikaksharam shruti shiro vakyam samakarnyatam. Having devoted yourself to gaining self-knowledge, sangah satsu vidhiyatam. The company of saintly people is to be sought, because bhagavato bhaktir dridhadhiyatam. Their influence will help you develop deep devotion for Ishvara. Also, Santyadih parichiyatam. Certain values are to be cultivated. Virtues like tranquility, self-control, dispassion, forbearance, faith, and concentration. Finally, dridataram karmashu santyajyatam. Selfish actions are to be given up, and your deeds are to be guided by dharma alone. These 12 steps describe practices that are to be performed in the first stage of spiritual life, to help you become a fully qualified student who is prepared for the next stage of the spiritual journey, which is the process of self-enquiry. This process requires proper guidance. Therefore, sad-vidvan upasripyatam. A qualified guru, one who knows Brahman, is to be approached. And pratidinam tatpaduka sevyatam. Service is to be rendered to support your guru as required. Then, with your guru's guidance, brahmaikaksharam artyatam. The highest reality, Brahman, is to be discovered within yourself. How? Shruti Shiro Vakyam Samakarnyatam, by listening to the teachings of Vedanta as taught by your guru. Then, Vakyartascha vicharyatam, Shruti Shira Paksha Samashriyatam, dustarkat suviramyatam, Shruti matastarko nusandhiyatam, Brahmasmiti vibhavyatam, aharahar garbha parityajyatam, deheham matirujyatam, buddha janarvara parityajyatam. With your guru's guidance, Vakyartascha vicharyatam, the meanings of the Mahavakyas, like Tattvamasi, are to be carefully examined. Shruti Shira Pakshassamashriyatam, relying on the scriptures to interpret those Mahavakyas properly. Dustarkat suviramyatam, the improper use of logic and reasoning is to be avoided. Instead, Shruti matastarko nusandhiyatam, the reasoning employed by the scriptures themselves is to be followed. Then, Brahmasmiti vibhavyatam, the teaching I am Brahman is to be contemplated upon. Through that contemplation, aharahar garva parityajyatam, your false ego will gradually be eradicated, and deheham matir ujyatam, identification with your body will be removed. Having gained self-knowledge through these steps, Buddha janar varaf parityajyatam, there is no need for further scholarly debates. This second group of 12 steps is meant to lead you through a process of self-enquiry that culminates in the acquisition of self-knowledge. The third stage of spiritual life is to fully assimilate that knowledge, to develop the ability to appreciate your divine nature, not just during study and meditation, but even in the midst of your day-to-day activities. Kshud-vyadhis chikitsyatam, pratidinam bhikshaushadham bhujyatam, sad-vidvan natu yachyatam, vidhivashat praptena santushyatam, shitoshnadi vishahyatam, natu vrata vakyam samucharyatam, audasinyam abhipsyatam, janakripa naishturyam. Knowing that your divine nature is not affected by hunger or anything else, kshud-vyadhis chikitsyatam, hunger is to be treated like any other illness. And pratidinam bhikshaushadam bhujyatam, that illness should be remedied by the medicine of food received as alms. It's generally sannyasis who receive food as alms. Shankaracharya was a sannyasi, as were his disciples, so he assumed that readers of this text would probably be sannyasis as well. But the principle applies to everyone. Swadvanam natu yachyatam, your favorite foods need not be sought. On the other hand, vidivashat praptena santushyatam, you can learn to be content with whatever food is available. Since your true nature remains unaffected by external afflictions, shitoshnadi vishahyatam, discomforts like cold and heat can be endured without complaint. and natu vrata vakyam samucharyatam. Unnecessary talking can be avoided. Audasinyam abhipsyatam. Indifference to pleasant and painful experiences is to be cultivated. And janakripa naishturyam utsrajyatam. The kind and cruel deeds of people are to be ignored. These 8 practices are to be performed during the 3rd stage of spiritual life to help you fully assimilate the knowledge of your true nature by integrating it into your daily life. The last verse explains the steps involved in the final stage of your spiritual journey. Ekante sukham asyatam paratare chetas samadhiyatam purnatma susamikshatam jagaridam tatparitam drishyatam prakarma pravilapyatam chitibalanapyuttaraishlisyatam prarabdham tviha bhujyatam atapara brahmatmana sthiyatam. Ekante sukham asyatam. Sitting comfortably for meditation. Paratare cheta samadhiyatam. Your mind is to be absorbed in Brahman. And purnatma susamikshatam. The fullness of your own true nature is to be clearly recognized. Jagadidam tatbaditam drishyatam. The rest of the world is to be recognized as being false, insubstantial, and incapable of affecting you in any way. By the strength of your knowledge, prak karma pravilapyatam. Your prior karmas will be destroyed, and chitibalan napyuttaraishlisyatam. Further karmas need not be performed, except for those needed to sustain your body. Living in this manner, prarabdham tviha bhujyatam. Your prarabdha karmas will gradually be exhausted, and atha parabrahmatmana sthiyatam. When your body dies, your true nature will be unaffected by death and remain utterly non-separate from Brahman. With this final step, the last stage of the spiritual journey comes to an end. Those who are enlightened experience complete freedom from suffering while they live, and after death, they are never again born into a life of struggle and suffering. They remain eternally indivisible from the limitless source of all, Brahman. Through these 40 steps described in this text, you are led to metaphorically climb the stairs to enter a temple, the temple made of flesh and bone, that is your own body. After you enter that temple, with the help of Vedanta's powerful teachings, you can discover your own true nature as unchanging, limitless consciousness. Satchidananda Atma, full and complete, utterly unaffected by all the afflictions of worldly life.